All right, and peace and blessings. Welcome to another episode of Author Spotlight with Self-Publishing 30 Days. I'm your host, Rob Wybe Youngblood, President of Sales for Self-Publishing 30 Days, and your LinkedIn locksmith. I have the pleasure of being here with Sylvia Worsham, who we had a great conversation about how to say her last name properly. I'm a firm believer in making sure that we communicate effectively. So Sylvia is someone that I was able to connect with through Clubhouse. And then from Clubhouse, we were able to connect on LinkedIn. And then since then, we've been able to do some work together. Discovered that she was an author and said, listen, come on to the podcast and talk a little bit about your book. And let's see what we can do about impacting more lives together. So Sylvia, welcome to the Author Spotlight. How are you doing today?
Doing fabulous. Just got back from Los Angeles with the kids. It was a quick trip, but got some R&R and I'm ready to hit the ground running. It's Monday after all.
I love it. Yeah, you know, those road trips are important. Those flights are important, no matter how long they are. It gives you an opportunity to just get out of your zone. I know that I'm about 3 hours away from home, and I feel more productive now than I am when I'm in my office. So sometimes we just got to get away and get in different scenery. Speaking of getting away and speaking of scenery and locations, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you from originally? And tell us a little bit about your background.
So I'm originally from South Texas, the border town of Brownsville, Texas. And I'm the first child of 3 children of 2 Mexican immigrants. And so I'm full-blooded Mexican, is what most people don't know, because when they see Sylvia Worsham, they don't assume that at all.
Right.
My maiden name is Villalobos, and my first language is actually Spanish, not English. So I come from the South, and in the first 20 plus years of my life, I lived life based on other people's expectations of me. I got caught up in that trap of, I gotta do, I don't feel enough. So I gotta do this life a different way than what I was created to be. And then in 2012, I ended up having a very near-death experience where I had 6 doctors come into my hospital room and say, you have a 20% chance of surviving. And it was a little bit of a wake-up call. And at this point, I'm already divorced. I have a young son. I'm dating the second guy I'm gonna marry. And so it's a true awakening of sorts. And it kind of shifts my lens away from sales, which is what I did for the first part of my life. I worked for Pfizer pharmaceutical. So I was in medical sales for almost 20 years. And so then I wake up, I remarry, move to Austin, and kind of start this different journey, totally different journey, transition from medical sales to stay-at-home parent, which was a hard transition. And then from that lovely transition, I moved over into the entrepreneur space. And then lastly, but not least, became an author. Once the pandemic hit, as if change weren't enough for me, I ended up writing a book on some of these experiences, some of these turning points that were very critical in my life, and about my relationship with God, which has been such a blessing for me, all in all. So that's just a little synopsis.
Oh, I love it. You're right. I think if someone were to hear your last name, they definitely wouldn't peg you for having Mexican blood. But you know what's amazing? Because we live in a multicultural society, it's like anybody can be, anything. It's like when people hear my last name, Youngblood, the very first question that I get is, are you Indian? Like people always ask me if I'm Indian. Native American, right? Native American. Oddly enough, the last name Youngblood is derived from Austrian and German roots, right? So it used to be, and it's funny, I looked this up before I came to college. There's a place in New York, there's a museum where you can look up your genealogy. And the last name Youngblood was spelled Jungblut with a J, Jungblut, Jungblut. So it's just amazing. I'm like, man, I have Austrian, have German, have Italian. I'm just mixed
all over the place.
I'm just mixed with everything. You know what I'm saying?
I think that's all of us, though, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I love the fact that you're tapped into, your heritage. What about your background helped you to put your book together? First of all, tell us the name of your book, and tell us about how your background, your personal experience went into developing your book.
So the name of the book is Journey to Me, and the subtitle is Trust the Wisdom of Change. And the subtitle really was what kind of led me down the description of what the book was about and how my life experiences kind of played into it. Because for about 13 years, I had heard a very strong prompting from God to write a book. I was stuck in this perfectionist pattern of behavior that kind of kept me comfortable and safe in my not wanting to stretch out of that comfort zone and write the book, because bottom line, I didn't feel enough. I didn't feel like I had the value to
Right.
provide an audience. And so I kept kind of pushing, the book down, pushing it down. And how it played into Journey to Me was I kept hearing these messengers come to me. And I call them messengers because I do think they're angels on earth that God sends to people
Yeah.
in the form of a human being who kept asking me, I want what you have. How did you get there? Like how did you get your ever after? You are remarried, you redid your life, you look happy, you look full of joy. I want what you have. Can you tell me how you got there? And this kept kind of like swirling around in my head during the pandemic, because when the pandemic hit, I kept hearing this very strong prompting: write your book, it's time, trust me. Write your book, it's time, trust me. And the more I heard it, I knew that the Holy Spirit was communicating with me. And then when I heard the messenger say, I thought initially, well, what am I going to write about? And then when they kept asking me, how did you do that? I thought, well, let's write a book on how I did that, essentially, right? So
Yeah.
I went back and I reflected back on my life, and the answers are right there,
Mm,
because when we reflect, when we actually make the time daily to
yeah.
connect to the mind of God, the answers will emerge. But we
Yeah.
have to like sit back and sit still and be in silence, which is so hard, I think, for most human beings to do. I know it was so difficult for me to do it, but during the pandemic, I started to meditate more and more and more. And the more I meditated, the quieter my mind got, the more
Mm,
the answers came. And how I put the chapters together was always through guidance from God.
right.
I did not do this on my own by any chance, like by any way. I did it. I did it with him in my corner, and that's why I knew I would succeed.
No, I love how you put that together, and I think you're exactly right. It's like, we all have a message, and I think what people don't realize is that your message is able to uplift others who are going through it, right? So you've been through it, you got on the other side of it. Now your book is basically set up to help people understand the how they can get over it. Who is your book for? And tell us how has it impacted the marketplace?
When I started writing the book, I initially was targeting women because women were the ones asking me. And interestingly enough, halfway through the project, I started to post on social media sites because I was working with a writers community, and they kept saying that, part of the strategy of before you even publish the book is start kind of testing some of these ideas on these platforms and see how people react to it.
Yeah.
Well, I started to kind of see which stories were resonating more with audiences, because the book wasn't about me. It was about helping others and guiding them towards God during times of change. One, and two is that turning points can be life-changing, because I think most people get stuck in change is bad, change is bad, change is bad, when really change can be the most life-altering in the most beautiful way. And so the book kind of guides you through all these turning points that at first glance look horrible, like near-death experiences. Most people don't say, oh, that was such a blessing. No.
Right.
For me it was, because it made my relationship, I understood surrender,
Mhm.
what it meant to fully surrender to God. Because once you fully surrender to him, then it's easy for you to trust him to take the reins of your life.
Right.
Before then, you don't understand the concept of it. You think you have to think your way through these changes,
Yeah.
right? So um, point blank, it just really, really helped to put it on social media. And all of a sudden, once I turned around, a bunch of these men were following these stories, and they were commenting on how they too were going through turning points like divorce as a single parent.
Wow. Right.
And I started to engage more with men as much as women. So
Hmm.
initially, the project was geared towards women, and then it kind of shifted gears, and it's men and women. And the demographics I was looking at primarily were 30-year-olds all the way up to like 60-year-olds. Oh my God.
Yeah.
And I had like a huge demographic that started following the book, and it really, it it helps a great deal of people. I know that when you and I talked, I was talking more general terms like parents, like were
Hmm.
my parents.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that's who I was speaking to in my stories. But the interesting thing was that even young people that picked up the book and read it were
Yeah.
like, I can see myself in your stories. I can
Hmm.
remember what this felt like if they were bullied. Like chapter 2 talks about bullying, being bullied in high school. So I guide parents of bullied teenagers in chapter 2 on how to create a safe space for their teenagers, how to get them the help that they need,
Yeah.
how to pay attention to some of these warning signs that come about, because there's just too much suicide going on
Yeah.
in such young children. It's truly heartbreaking. So in answer to your question, there's some demographics that I am obviously targeting.
Hmm.
The majority of them were women that read, but I've had one guy reach out to me just recently and said, your chapter 2 that talked about forgiveness, because I talked about forgiving my bullies.
Hmm.
He said that really hit me hard. He goes to the point where he's writing a book, and there's a chapter on forgiveness that got inspired by chapter 2 of my book. So I was
Wow.
really excited. I was like, wow, that's awesome.
That is awesome. That is awesome. And that's major impact, right? So imagine if you didn't move forward, right? Imagine if you didn't allow or listen to the angel that said, hey, tell me how to get that. You know what I mean? And I think that's a message for those of you who are watching and listening, how important it is for you to move when an idea is placed on your spirit. I was talking to one of my business partners, and he says, ideas are like women. If you don't treat them right, they will leave you, right? They will leave you. And so you got to make sure. And obviously, I was talking to a gentleman, right? So it's like, he had a couple of women leave him. So he was like, listen, you want to make sure you take care of your ideas and take care of your women at the same time. But let's talk a little bit about how can people get their hands on your book. Obviously, it's a book that will empower men and women, even young people. But how can people get their hands on it? Say, for example, if they're looking for a way to, overcome the challenges that they're dealing with, whether it be, health challenges, divorce, things of that nature. How can people get access to your book?
The book is available on Amazon. It's self-published on Amazon, online through Barnes and Nobles. If you look up Journey to Me, Trust the Wisdom of Change, for those that don't have an Amazon account, that could be another way. But it's basically available online through various ways, because I did the book through Ingram Sparks, and Ingram, as you know, has relationships with all bookstore, independent bookstores across
Mhm.
the nation. So really an independent bookstore can actually order the book. It should be available for them, and it's available in all formats. I did that purposely so that whoever was doing ebooks, not necessarily having to do the Apple version of ebook, but just in general. Nooks also has it available. You have hardcover, you have paperback. The most popular one has been, interestingly enough, the hardcover, which I was very surprised at.
Mm.
But I was like, hey, I don't know why that is, but they
Yeah.
go for the hardcover. I'm not sure why, but it's in various formats, and it's available nationwide right now. And I'm hoping to make it available internationally soon,
Okay.
because it's being translated into Spanish for those Spanish speakers that have come up to me and said,
Good.
I really need you to have this. So that I had a pastor that came up to me who's a pastor in South Texas,
Hmm.
who got a hold of my book through his mother. interestingly enough. And she needed it to be translated because she wanted to read the book, but she didn't really know how to read in English. So they started translating the book for her. And he said, I want to make it available to my congregation because I think it's an amazing book that talks a lot about the relationship with God.
Yeah.
And turn to him in times of change. Because I think most people right now are turning away from him. And so it's a very good book to get your hands on.
No, I love it. And I appreciate you sharing that because it's so needed, and in this day and age with all that's going on. I mean, at the time of us recording this, we're seeing countries invading other countries and people just dealing with just this whole concept of war. And there's a whole generation that they've not seen that, they've not been exposed. And because of social media, it's right in our face. It's like you literally so people need encouragement like never before, and I'm so grateful. Just a few more questions before we land the plane. What would you say was the biggest challenge that you had to overcome when writing your book? Well, obviously you talked about being tapped on the shoulder and being inspired by God to put the book together. But what would you say is the biggest challenge that you had to overcome as you were going through this process of becoming an author and putting this book together?
Feeling like I was enough to do it. I think that was the biggest challenge to get past. And interestingly enough, as I started putting pen to paper, or in my case, pencil to paper, through journaling first, and then I typed it up. It was getting past the perfectionist in me, getting past the I'm not enough in me, to say, I do have the value. Who am I to question God when he's in my corner and he's been prompting me? And these are his words. This is his inspiration.
Yeah.
I question him. He knows what's coming. He knows what needs to be put out there. I'm part of that plan, and step fully into his master plan for your life.
Yeah.
Surrender must be part of that equation. And since I had already done it, I tapped back into surrender, into that near-death experience. And I told myself, you've been there before. You've been there. You know how to do this now. It's not like you're facing this where, you feel like your mind has gone blank and you don't know what's going to happen next.
Right.
Uncertainty feels like that for most people. When they look at uncertainty, that's the way. You don't know to step into it, because the more you step into it, the more your path gets revealed.
Right.
And once I stepped into it and just kind of mustered the strength and the courage to just take that initial first step of get this book together, just start writing, get out of your perfectionist way. Then it started to really, I started to relax and actually enjoy the process. And then I healed a lot of the parts of me that needed to be healed. And that's probably why a big part of the reason why God prompted me to write the book was initially to also heal me.
I love it. I love it. So many lives are going to be touched as a result of not only this podcast, but of your book. I'm so grateful that you were willing to be obedient to the call. As we land the plane, I have one curveball question that I'm going to throw at you, and then another one is just a general wrap up, anything that's on your heart. So say, for example, you get ready to do your next book, right? And you could travel anywhere in the world to write this book. Where would you go if myself and my team were paying for it? Where in the world would you travel to put together your next book if we were paying for it?
The one thing that's popping up in my head is Greece.
Okay.
Greece. Interesting. I've never had the opportunity to go.
Okay.
I've always wanted to be there. I've seen the ocean. I love anywhere with an ocean and with a rich culture. And I would likely be there just enjoying the sunrises and the sunsets and just stepping fully into that joyful part of myself.
I love it. I love it. There's only one or two other people that have said Greece, so you're in good company. Listen, Sylvia, thank you so much for just the opportunity to share your story. I'm so excited about people being able to get to know you, follow you and your journey. Tell us one or two things that's on your heart as we wrap up, and then once again, tell folks how they can get access to you and your book.
So guys, I just want you to know that turning points can be very life-changing for you. And it's a matter of perspective and focus. If you're focused on the negative of life, that's what you're going to attract, and that's what's going to keep you company. But if you turn, and when you turn to God during these times of change, He will guide you to your light. You will emerge from the darkness that you find yourself in today into your own light and your divine soul's purpose. And last but not least, you can reach me. I'm really available on all social media sites. As Rob mentioned, I'm on Clubhouse. I'm also on Instagram as Coach Sylvia Worsham. I have my webpage, sylviaworsham.com, that you can connect with me on. And there's just various, I'm everywhere. I'm LinkedIn, Facebook. I have a Journey to Me Facebook group that if it's open to the public, so you are welcome to join at any time to learn more about the book and how I put those stories together and pictures that go along with those stories. Thanks so much.
I love it. No, my pleasure. And listen, for those of you who are watching, listening, if this is your very first time, please join us on our various social media platforms, whether it's on LinkedIn, Instagram, definitely on Clubhouse. We're on Clubhouse on Thursdays with LinkedIn for authors and on Fridays with the Authors Roundtable. So make sure you join us. Visit our website to check out our blogs, and make sure you hit the like and subscribe button here on YouTube. For those of you who are watching on YouTube, I am excited about what's to come. We've got some phenomenal authors in addition to what Sylvia has done. We've got some great ones to come. So make sure you join us. And if you've missed any of our past episodes, make sure you go watch them and give your comments, and make sure you let Sylvia know that you found her here on the Author Spotlight. Be encouraged, be blessed, but most of all, be fruitful and be faithful over the gift that you've been given. Why? Because your gift will make room for you. We'll see you on the next episode of the Author Spotlight. Peace.